Welcome to my channel. Let me ask you a question. Who was the richest person in history? Maybe you are thinking about modern billionaires. Maybe names like powerful business leaders or famous entrepreneurs come to your mind. Many people believe that the richest people in history lived in our modern world, surrounded by technology, companies, and global markets. Others think about powerful kings and emperors who ruled large lands and controlled great armies. But the real answer may surprise you. More than 700 years ago, long before modern banks, long before billion-dollar companies, and long before skyscrapers filled our cities, there lived a ruler in Africa whose wealth was so great that historians still struggle to measure it today. His name was Mansa Musa. And his story is almost unbelievable. There is a moment in history when this powerful king began a long journey across the Sahara Desert. He did not travel alone. Thousands of people traveled with him. Soldiers walked beside him. Servants carried supplies. Camels moved slowly through the desert, carrying bags filled with gold. Not small amounts of gold, but mountains of it. When he arrived in the great city of Cairo, something extraordinary happened. Mansa Musa began giving gold away. He gave gold to the poor. He gave gold to travelers. He gave gold as gifts to leaders and communities. His generosity was so great that the amount of gold in the city suddenly increased. And when too much gold appeared in the market, the value of gold actually fell. For years, the economy of the region felt the impact of his visit. Imagine that for a moment. One man's journey changed the price of gold. But here is something even more interesting. The story of Mansa Musa is not only about wealth. Yes, he may have been the richest ruler the world has ever seen. But his true legacy is much deeper than gold. He ruled a powerful African kingdom known as the Mali Empire, a place filled with thriving cities, busy trade routes, and centers of learning. Under his leadership, knowledge, culture, and education began to grow in ways that amazed travelers and scholars from many parts of the world. So today we are not only talking about a rich king. We are exploring the story of a leader who helped build one of the most fascinating civilizations in history. How did a young ruler become the most famous emperor of medieval Africa? What really happened during his legendary journey across the desert to Mecca? And how did his actions change the way the world saw Africa forever? Stay with me until the end of this video, because today we will explore the legacy of Mansa Musa, a powerful story of wealth, faith, knowledge, and a kingdom that once amazed the world. Chapter 1: The Rise of a King, the Mali Empire and the Early Life of Mansa Musa. Long before modern countries appeared on maps, long before airplanes crossed oceans and technology connected the world in seconds, powerful kingdoms were already rising in different parts of the world. Some of these kingdoms were in Europe, some were in Asia, and some were in Africa. One of the most powerful and fascinating kingdoms in African history was the Mali Empire. This empire grew in West Africa many centuries ago, and at its height it became one of the richest and most influential kingdoms on earth. Its rulers controlled large lands, busy cities, and most importantly, some of the most valuable trade routes in the world. To understand the rise of Mansa Musa, we first need to understand why the Mali Empire was so powerful. The secret of Mali's power was trade. Across the vast and dangerous Sahara Desert, Merchants traveled in long caravans of camels. These journeys were not easy. The desert was extremely hot during the day and very cold at night. Travelers had to move slowly, often for weeks, sometimes even months, to reach their destinations. But despite the danger, merchants continued to cross the desert again and again. Why? Because the goods they carried were incredibly valuable. From the northern regions came salt, which was extremely important in the medieval world. People needed salt to preserve food and to stay healthy. In fact, salt was sometimes as valuable as gold. From the southern regions came gold, ivory, and other precious materials. Beautiful cloth and textiles were also traded across these routes. And this is where the Mali Empire became incredibly important. Much of the gold traveling through these trade routes came from lands controlled by Mali. In the 13th and 14th centuries, West Africa was one of the greatest sources of gold in the entire world. Many historians believe that a large portion of the gold used in Europe and the Middle East during that time actually came from this region. Think about that for a moment. Gold coins used in distant kingdoms, jewelry worn by kings and queens, decorations inside palaces and temples. Much of that gold may have originally come from the lands ruled by the Mali Empire. This made Mali extremely wealthy and extremely important in global trade. Busy markets grew inside its cities. Merchants arrived from distant lands to buy gold and other goods. Caravans of camels moved slowly across the desert carrying wealth from one civilization to another. In this powerful and growing empire, a young leader was preparing to rise. His name was Mansa Musa. But before he became famous, before the world heard his name, Musa was simply part of the royal leadership of the Mali Empire. The word Mansa was not actually his first name. It was a title. In the language of the empire, Mansa meant king or emperor. It was the title given to the ruler of Mali. And the story of how Musa became emperor is one of the most unusual stories in royal history. Before Musa ruled the empire, another king sat on the throne. According to historical accounts, that king had a strong curiosity about the unknown world. At that time, the Great Atlantic Ocean was still a mystery to many people. No one knew exactly what existed beyond its horizon. The king wanted answers. So he decided to do something very bold and very risky. He organized an expedition to explore the ocean. He gathered ships, sailors, and supplies, and sent them into the vast waters of the Atlantic. The first expedition returned with very little information. But the king was still curious. So he prepared another expedition. This time it was even larger. Hundreds of ships were prepared for the journey. And this time, the king decided to lead the expedition himself. The fleet sailed into the ocean. And then something mysterious happened. The ships never returned. No one knows exactly what happened to the king or his fleet. They disappeared into history, leaving behind one of the greatest mysteries of medieval exploration. Because the king never returned, the responsibility of ruling the Mali Empire passed to Musa, who had been serving as a deputy ruler. Almost suddenly, Musa became the new emperor. Now he was Mansa Musa, the ruler of one of the most powerful empires in Africa. But Musa was not only a ruler who inherited wealth. Historical descriptions show that he was intelligent, disciplined, and thoughtful. He believed that leadership was a responsibility, not just a privilege. He also had strong religious faith and believed that a ruler should support justice, education, and the well-being of his people. Under his leadership, the empire continued to grow stronger. Trade became more organized. Roads and routes became safer for merchants. Markets expanded, and the wealth of the empire increased. But the greatness of Mali was not only about gold and trade. It was also about its cities. One of the most famous cities of the empire was Timbuktu. During Musa's time, Timbuktu became an important center of trade, culture, and learning. Merchants arrived there from many regions. Scholars gathered there to study religion, science, mathematics, and law. Another important city was Gao, which also became a powerful center of commerce and government. These cities connected the Mali Empire to a larger world of ideas, culture, and knowledge. Travelers from distant lands heard stories about the wealth and organization of the empire. Slowly, the reputation of Mali began spreading far beyond West Africa. And at the center of this growing empire stood Mansa Musa. But soon, something would happen that would make his name famous across continents. Musa was not only a king. He was also a devoted Muslim. And like many Muslims, he dreamed of completing the sacred journey to the holy city of Mecca. For most people in the medieval world, such a journey was extremely difficult. It required crossing deserts, traveling through unfamiliar lands, and spending months away from home. But when an emperor decides to make such a journey, the story becomes much bigger. Because Mansa Musa was not planning to travel like an ordinary pilgrim. He was about to begin a journey so extraordinary that the entire world would soon hear about it. A journey across continents. A journey across the Sahara Desert. And a journey that would carry so much gold that history would never forget it. Chapter 2: The Legendary Journey. The pilgrimage that shocked the world in the early 14th century. Something extraordinary was about to happen. A journey was being planned that would soon become one of the most famous stories in world history. The man behind this journey was Mansa Musa, the powerful ruler of the Mali Empire. But this was not a journey for conquest or war. It was a journey of faith. In Islam, there is a sacred pilgrimage known as the Hajj. Muslims are encouraged to make this journey at least once in their lifetime if they have the ability and the resources to do so. The pilgrimage takes believers to the holy city of Mecca, a place deeply important to Muslims around the world. For many ordinary people in the medieval world, traveling to Mecca was extremely difficult. The journey could take months or even years. Travelers had to cross deserts, pass through unfamiliar lands, and face many dangers along the way. But Mansa Musa was not an ordinary traveler. He was the emperor of one of the richest kingdoms in the world. When he decided to perform the Hajj in the year 1324, the journey quickly became something far greater than a simple pilgrimage. It became a historic event. Imagine a long line of travelers slowly moving across the vast Sahara Desert. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. The sun burned during the day, and the nights were cold and silent. But this caravan was unlike anything people had seen before. Historical accounts describe thousands of people traveling with the emperor. Soldiers walked to protect the group. Servants carried supplies. Officials helped organize the movement of the caravan. Scholars and advisors traveled beside the emperor as well. Hundreds of camels moved slowly through the desert sand. But these were not ordinary camels carrying simple goods. Many of them carried gold. Some historians say that each camel carried hundreds of pounds of pure gold. Bags of gold dust and gold bars were part of the supplies of the emperor. The wealth of the Mali Empire was traveling with him across continents. The journey itself took many months. The caravan moved slowly, stopping at towns and cities along the way. Everywhere the emperor traveled, people were amazed by the size and richness of his caravan. But the most dramatic moment of this journey happened when Mansa Musa arrived in the great city of Cairo. At that time, Cairo was one of the most important cities in the Islamic world. It was filled with markets, scholars, merchants, and travelers from many regions. When news spread that a powerful king from West Africa had arrived, people gathered to see him. And what they saw was astonishing. The emperor did not arrive quietly. His caravan entered the city with thousands of people, richly dressed officials, and camels carrying incredible amounts of gold. It was a sight that many people in Cairo had never seen before. But what truly surprised the people was the generosity of the emperor. Instead of keeping his gold hidden, Mansa Musa began giving it away. He gave gold to the poor. He gave gold to travelers. He gave gold to community leaders and religious institutions. Anyone in need could receive gifts from the emperor. His generosity became legendary. But something unexpected happened because of it. There was suddenly so much gold circulating in the markets of Cairo that the value of gold began to drop. In simple terms, when too much gold entered the market, it became less rare and less valuable. Historians believe that the economy of Egypt felt the effects of Musa's visit for many years. The price of gold stayed lower for a long time because of the enormous amount he distributed. Think about that for a moment. One ruler traveled through a city and gave away so much gold that it changed the economy of an entire region. Stories about this incredible African king quickly spread far beyond Egypt. Merchants carried the news across trade routes. Travelers told the story in distant cities. Soon people across the Middle East and even parts of Europe began hearing about a powerful emperor from West Africa who possessed unimaginable wealth. For many people outside Africa, this was the first time they truly learned about the power and riches of the Mali Empire. The journey of Mansa Musa changed how the world viewed Africa. Before this moment, many regions knew very little about the kingdoms of West Africa. But Musa's pilgrimage brought international attention to his empire. His fame became so great that European mapmakers later included his image in one of the most famous medieval maps ever created, the Catalan Atlas. On this map, Mansa Musa is shown sitting proudly as a king, holding a large piece of gold in his hand. This image symbolized his reputation as one of the richest rulers in the world. It also showed that the Mali Empire was an important and respected power. But the journey of Musa was not only about wealth and reputation. For the emperor, the pilgrimage was also a deeply spiritual experience. He traveled to Mecca to fulfill an important religious duty and to strengthen his connection to the wider Muslim world. During his travels, he met scholars, leaders, and architects from different regions. These connections would later help him bring new ideas, knowledge, and architecture back to his empire. And this would become one of the most important parts of his legacy. Because when Mansa Musa returned home from his legendary journey, he did not only bring stories of gold and generosity. He brought something even more powerful: new ideas, new knowledge, and a vision to transform the Mali Empire into one of the greatest centers of learning and culture in the medieval world. Chapter 3: Building a Civilization, Education, Cities, and the Golden Age of Mali. When Mansa Musa finally returned home from his famous pilgrimage, the world already knew his name. Stories about his wealth had spread across the Middle East, across North Africa, and even into parts of Europe. People were amazed by the king who had traveled with thousands of followers and camels carrying gold. But something very important happened after his return. Instead of simply enjoying his wealth, Musa began focusing on something much deeper and more powerful. He wanted to build a civilization based on knowledge, education, and culture. This decision became one of the most important parts of his legacy. Many rulers in history became famous because they built armies or conquered lands. But Mansa Musa understood something different. He believed that the true strength of a kingdom does not come only from gold or soldiers. True strength comes from ideas, learning, and wisdom. So he began inviting scholars, teachers, and architects from different parts of the Islamic world to come to the Mali Empire. These scholars came from regions such as Egypt, Morocco, and other centers of Islamic learning. They brought books, knowledge, and new ideas with them. Some were experts in mathematics. Some studied astronomy. Others were teachers of law, medicine, or religion. Musa welcomed them and supported their work. His vision was clear. He wanted Mali to become one of the great centers of education in the medieval world. And slowly, that vision began to become reality. One city in particular became the heart of this intellectual transformation. That city was Timbuktu. Today, many people have heard the name Timbuktu and imagine it as a distant place in the desert. But during the time of Mansa Musa, Timbuktu became one of the most famous cities of learning in the world. Merchants were already traveling there because of trade. But now something new was happening. Students began arriving. Scholars gathered inside the city to teach and study. Libraries were built to protect and store valuable manuscripts. Schools were created where young people could learn about religion, science, mathematics, and philosophy. In these centers of learning, students studied many subjects. They learned about astronomy and how to observe the stars. They studied mathematics and advanced calculations. Some studied medicine to understand the human body and how to treat illness. Others focused on law and religion. Books became extremely valuable objects in Timbuktu. In fact, in some cases books were even more valuable than gold. Families carefully preserved manuscripts and passed them from generation to generation. These books contained knowledge collected from many parts of the world. Scholars traveled long distances just to study in Timbuktu's learning centers. And this transformation did not happen by accident. It happened because Mansa Musa believed deeply in education. During this time, one of the most famous buildings in the city was constructed. It was the Jingareba Mosque. This mosque became much more than a place of worship. It also became an important center for learning and intellectual discussion. Students and scholars gathered there to exchange ideas and study religious texts. The building itself was designed by skilled architects and remains one of the most famous historical landmarks in West Africa. Even today, centuries later, the mosque still stands as a symbol of the golden age of Mali. But the growth of knowledge was not the only success of Musa's leadership. Trade continued to expand across the empire. Caravans still crossed the massive Sahara Desert, carrying goods between regions. Merchants arrived from North Africa and from cities across the Middle East. They brought textiles, spices, books, and other valuable goods. In return, they purchased gold, salt, ivory, and agricultural products from the lands of the Mali Empire. Markets grew larger. Cities became busier. The empire remained one of the most important centers of trade in the medieval world. Another important city that benefited from this prosperity was Gao, which became a strong political and economic center of the empire. But if we look carefully at the story of Mansa Musa, we see something very important. His greatest achievement was not simply wealth. Many rulers in history were rich. Many kingdoms controlled gold mines or trade routes. Wealth can rise quickly, but it can also disappear quickly. Musa understood that wealth alone cannot build a lasting civilization. Gold can buy goods. Gold can build buildings. But gold cannot create wisdom by itself. Knowledge creates wisdom. Education builds strong societies. Ideas travel across generations. And that is exactly what Musa tried to build. By investing in schools, libraries, scholars, and architecture, he helped create a cultural and intellectual life that would influence West Africa for centuries. Because of this, historians today do not remember him only as the richest ruler in history. They remember him as a builder of civilization. A ruler who believed that learning and culture were just as important as wealth and power. And this belief helped transform the Mali Empire into one of the most remarkable societies of the medieval world. But every great empire eventually faces change. Time moves forward. New rulers appear. Trade routes shift. And the question that history asks is always the same. What remains after the empire fades? In the final chapter, we will explore the lasting legacy of Mansa Musa, and why, even today, more than 700 years later, the world still remembers his name. Chapter 4. The Legacy. Why the world still talks about Mansa Musa. More than 700 years have passed since the time of Mansa Musa. Empires have risen and fallen. Borders have changed. New nations have appeared on maps. Technology has transformed the way people live and communicate. But even after all this time, historians, scholars, and storytellers around the world still talk about the legendary emperor of the Mali Empire. Why? What makes his story so powerful that people still study it today? The first reason is simple: his wealth was almost impossible to imagine. Many historians believe that Mansa Musa may have been the richest person who ever lived. Some modern experts have even tried to estimate his fortune using today's economic systems. According to some estimates, if his wealth could be converted into modern value, it might be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But many historians say something very interesting. They say his wealth is actually impossible to measure. Why? Because Musa did not only control gold mines. He ruled an empire that controlled the most important gold-producing regions in the medieval world. Large amounts of gold traveling through international trade passed through his lands. The economy of the Mali Empire was deeply connected to global trade routes. Merchants traveling across the massive Sahara Desert carried goods between different civilizations. Gold, salt, ivory, textiles, books, and many other valuable goods moved along these routes. Because of this, Musa's influence reached far beyond his own kingdom. But here is the most important part of the story. When historians discuss Mansa Musa, they do not focus only on his gold. They focus on his impact. His famous pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 introduced the wider world to the power and wealth of West Africa. Before this journey, many regions in Europe and parts of the Middle East knew very little about the great kingdoms south of the Sahara. But after his journey, that began to change. Stories about the African emperor who traveled with thousands of people and camels carrying gold spread across continents. Mapmakers began including the Mali Empire on world maps. One famous example is the Catalan Atlas, where Mansa Musa appears sitting proudly as a king holding a large piece of gold in his hand. This image symbolized the wealth and influence of his empire. In many ways, Musa helped place West Africa on the global map. But perhaps his most important legacy was not wealth or fame. It was knowledge. During his reign, the city of Timbuktu became one of the most respected centers of learning in the medieval world. Scholars traveled there to study religion, science, law, mathematics, and astronomy. Libraries filled with handwritten manuscripts were built to preserve knowledge. Some of those manuscripts still exist today. These ancient texts contain information about medicine, philosophy, mathematics, history, and culture. They remind us that intellectual life in West Africa was vibrant and advanced centuries ago. The famous Jingareba Mosque, built during Musa's era, also became an important center of education. It was not only a place for prayer but also a gathering place for scholars and students. This tradition of learning continued for generations. Because of these efforts, the cultural and intellectual influence of the Mali Empire spread across the region. Future African kingdoms learned from its systems of trade, governance, and education. Cities continued to grow along important trade routes. Merchants continued to cross the Sahara Desert, connecting different cultures and economies. In this way, the influence of Mansa Musa did not end with his lifetime. It shaped the region for centuries. But there is also an important lesson hidden inside this story. Many people become famous because of wealth. But wealth alone rarely creates a lasting legacy. Money can disappear. Gold can be lost. Empires can fade with time. But knowledge can survive for centuries. Education can influence generations. Ideas can travel across time and change the future. That is why the story of Mansa Musa is still meaningful today. He did not only collect wealth. He used his wealth to build schools. He supported scholars. He encouraged the spread of knowledge. He invested in culture, architecture, and education. In other words, he understood something that many leaders forget. True greatness is not measured by how much wealth a person owns. True greatness is measured by the impact a person leaves behind. More than 700 years have passed. The golden caravans are gone. The powerful empire eventually changed with time. But the name Mansa Musa still appears in history books, classrooms, and conversations around the world. His story reminds us that great civilizations have existed in every part of the world. And sometimes, the most powerful legacy a person can leave behind is not gold. It is knowledge, culture, and inspiration for future generations. Even today, when historians speak about the greatest rulers in human history, the name of the emperor from the Mali Empire still shines brightly. A king whose wealth amazed the world. A leader who invested in learning and civilization. A legacy that history will never forget. If this video helped you discover the incredible story of Mansa Musa, if it helped you learn English while exploring a real and powerful moment in world history, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. Because here, we do something special. We don't just learn English through grammar rules and difficult textbooks. We learn English through real stories, fascinating history, and inspiring lives that changed the world. Stories like the rise of the Mali Empire, the famous journey across the Sahara Desert, and the great centers of learning in Timbuktu remind us that language becomes powerful when it connects us with knowledge. So if you believe learning English should also open the door to history, ideas, and wisdom, subscribe to the channel and join this learning journey. Also, take 1 second to like this video. Your like helps more English learners around the world discover these powerful stories. And now I want to hear from you. Write a comment below and tell me one thing that surprised you the most about Mansa Musa. Was it his unbelievable wealth? Was it his legendary journey to Mecca? Or was it the great centers of knowledge and learning he helped build? Remember something very important. Learning English is not only about memorizing words or grammar rules. It is about understanding the stories that shaped our world, the civilizations that built knowledge, and the leaders whose ideas still inspire people today. And sometimes, the most powerful stories come from places that history once ignored, but the world will never forget.